Welcome everybody to podcast number 246. Are you implementing like you should on mega projects? Stay with us.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome everyone. I hope you're doing well. This is going to be a great podcast. We're going to talk about mega project operational excellence implementation. And so we are going to get this going. I have some experience with this. Everything is fractal. So I don't know how to describe that word in its exact definition, but fractal means there are geometric or systematic patterns throughout the system, meaning that something on a smaller scale is also represented on a larger scale. So if it works for smaller things, it works for larger things. If it works for smaller teams, it works for larger teams. The concepts that we talk about in this podcast and that the lean community talks about are fractal. So they can be scaled. They work, I would say, in any level of the organization. Let me give you a quick example. When we talk about Last Planner, or Takt or CPM, it's kind of hard to imagine what I'm talking about, but it's really easy to imagine it with Scrum teams. Scrum teams are smaller teams. The ideal team size is 4 or 5. I think that the recommendation is to have 3 to 9, but the ideal team size for a Scrum team is 4, the development team. And when there has to be multiple teams for a larger organization, they go into a fractal situation where they have multiple development teams over different aspects of whatever they're developing, and then they have a scrum of scrum teams. So then those any representatives from the other scrum teams come together in a scrum of scrums, or in a scrum of scrum of scrums, or in a scrum of scrum of scrum of scrums. So what I'm saying is, let's say you have 8 basic units. Well, representatives from those 8 basic units will meet in a scrum of scrums meeting. And let's say you have 4 scrum of scrum groups. Those 4 representatives will meet in a scrum of scrum meeting and report and align and scale communication. So I really like to visualize the fractal nature of Scrum for large organizations. And if somebody was like, oh my gosh, Scrum only deals with like 3 to 9 people, an ideal team size of 4, that doesn't work. Well, then here's what you have to consider. Large companies like Google and Apple and some of the biggest companies, in the world use Scrum, and they're huge organizations. Some of these are the largest companies in the world. It's fractal. That's the same thing that we're talking about with mega projects in construction. It's all fractal. It all comes down to the same basic principles. The only thing that's more difficult is that if you have like an $80 million job, and there's a difficult leader, you can more easily remove the difficult leader or somebody who's not performing on that job than you can on a mega project. Most of the time, the problems that are occurring on a mega project is because the leader is in charge of so much scope, but that leader is so invaluable you can't get rid of her or him, but also their bad habits are scaling throughout the entire project. And I'm not saying that this happens every time, but it's something to basically focus on and to know about so that we can overcome it. But we really need to know that whatever level of organization, whatever portion of the project we're over, we can have pockets of excellence, and that is the best way to scale. So that's my little opening here for today. I want to begin this podcast today with kind of a positive note. So I have had some really high-powered people talk to me recently, invite me out to their companies to do some really great things. And even though I've been incentivized for a number of years to be well outside of my comfort zone and in high-performing situations, I find myself and this isn't whining, this is just something like new. So I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I'm not whining. I'm not being overly dramatic. But I find myself literally starting a day, and I have it nicely time blocked with a little bit of, a couple of breaks. And it's like, okay, we're going to do this webinar, and then we're going to do an intervention with this team, and then we're going to get on a coaching call, and then we're going to solve this massive problem virtually with this organization, and then we're going to get update the website. And if you haven't ever done that, that's like super intense and difficult. And then I'm going to deal with this feedback from the CPM lover that's giving me a hard time. And then I have to show up for a podcast 100% with an outline. And then it's like, okay, all right. I have to show up 100%, all day long. And I used to, even when I was a director, have some breaks where I could be at 70, 75%, 60% and kind of cruise a little bit, because humans weren't designed all the time to be outside of their comfort zone. And I can say that recently, what's really been getting me through are mentors. Now, if you have a mentor reach out to you and give you free advice, give you friendly advice, give you advice about how to, you can better yourself and live your life, treat that like it's a bar of gold. Treat that like it's the most precious thing to you, because I promise you it is. I once heard Tony Robbins say in an Unleash the Power Within event that you have to get around a mentor, and that's really the only way that you're going to make massive progress towards the direction that you want to go. And I kind of dismissed it, but I'm really rethinking that in life, because if you want to be a business owner, you need to be around business owner mentors. If you want to be, a church leader, you need to be around church leader mentors. If you want to be rich, you need to be around rich mentors. If you want, anything you want to do, if you want to be a great fisher person, or fisherman, whatever, however you say that, you need to be around great mentors that can do that. Somebody who's been there before. And it's the quickest path to massive success. So just wanted to talk really quickly. I sent last night a text to one of my mentors, just really just showing some appreciation. That has been the biggest difference in my life for business, for finances. I mean, just a real quick example. People attract other people with like energy. And if you want to be around good people, giving people, or I'm just making things up now for me. I want to be around giving people, charitable people, kind people. I want to be around people that are honest and ethical. I want to be around people that want to give. I want to be around people that are wealthy, that know how to build wealth so that they can give it away, right? And so that's my mentor. I have a couple of them. They're like that. And then their financial advisors and their accountants and their other people are like that as well. And so when they recommend people to be around me, when they recommend financial advisors, when they recommend accountants, when they recommend friends, when they recommend business owners, they're all somewhat similar and heading in the same direction. I think it's fantastic. So I wanted to talk to you about that. If you want to head in a direction, if you have a vision, you need to have a mentor. If you were an Olympic or an aspiring Olympic gold medalist or an athlete, you would get a mentor. You would get a coach, right? Coaches move you forward. In fact, I can't believe I forgot that. The definition of a coach, and I've never heard this before, is someone who moves you forward. The word coach kind of came around, when the Tony Robbins movement kind of came forward. People didn't call people coaches back in the day. But when you think about a coach, like a horse-drawn coach, what does a coach do? They move you forward. So a real coach in life moves you forward, right? So that's really no different than a mentor. If you want to move forward, you get somebody who's been there before that can move you forward. So I like that. Anyway, wanted to talk to you about that as we get moving forward. The other thing, just a reminder, if anyone is in need of project recovery, training or boot camps, or consulting or speaking events or speaking engagements when it comes to construction, please let me know. Also, when I talked about, hey, do you have a question? Please let me know. This type of podcast came about to answer a direct question. I love answering questions. I also promised that I would put these on the YouTube channel if it was better to visualize them. And so please, please, please keep the questions and the feedback coming. I absolutely love it. So let's go ahead and do a couple of items of scaffolding here. I want to make sure that we get the normal introduction going along. So let me talk about some feedback. This is actually a little bit longer, but it ties into the rest of the podcast. So let's talk about it. Your podcast has been great for helping me see what possibilities there are out there and a different perspective on things. I think I've been stuck in the figure eight cycle for a while on some items, and I'm looking to work my way out of them. There are a lot of podcasts where I can see myself, and it seems like you are literally talking to me directly, face to face, and not on the radio as I'm driving down the road. I can see cycles I've let myself get into and things I know I've needed to work on that I have put on the back burner that need to make it back on the front burner. There are also many times I so agree with the and I, me, blah, blah, blah. I've been stuck in that rut lately, and you have been helping me tremendously to give me the willpower to pull myself out and try to do better, to get back on track and to be the leader of the pack, whatever pack I happen to be a part of at the moment. I've always been on the forefront of new things as they have come up from LEAD, BIM, lean leadership, IPD, but have fallen behind the last few years and need to get back to the forefront of this industry. Things have been changing fast in the last few years, and I agree that we need to have proven softwares and techniques and applications and systems in place and not switch every few months to whatever the latest hit is. Again, I want to personally thank you for all you do. I attended the same Dean and Tony event about selling yourself and your talents, and I thought to myself, how would I ever be able to sell being a superintendent to anyone? But my friend, I can say you picked up that ball and ran with it and then hit a home run with it. I am so glad you did. Ever forward. And I just really appreciate this feedback. The person that gave me this feedback also gave me this question, and we're going to have some fun with it this morning. So what am I excited about in life? I'm excited about visiting companies this month and starting that journey and really helping large organizations to improve their field operations because they care about people. So I'm going to return a report on some of those efforts. Really looking forward to that experience and heading in that direction. So let's go ahead and get started with this podcast. You can scale excellence on any size project, even if they're mega projects. So I will, let me give you a little bit of a story here. So I've seen and been around a lot of mega projects. I remember one in Phoenix, Arizona. I happen to live here, but that wasn't with the story at the time. But it was a mega project, multiple like large acres. It wasn't like 1,000 acres. But it was, I think, 175 acre project, multiple massive buildings, some of the best superintendents out there. There were 20 plus. And so each building was independently run with the team. And I remember commenting to the general superintendent, who I respected and still respect to this day, this project is run remarkably. They had some economies of scale out there. They had purchased their own pump truck. They had purchased their own water truck. The site logistics were immaculate. The trailers and the interaction spaces for the teams were immaculate. The way they dug their footings were immaculate. It was clean, safe, organized. It was just a really, really well-run mega project because it was fractal and they had scaled the same type of techniques that they did on smaller projects. And I remember telling that to the general superintendent. I was like, wow, I really like this, this, and this. And he said, it kind of snarkily back to me, oh, well, I just always thought that's how you did it, Jason, and I thought that was kind of funny. And that point is pretty profound in my mind because there shouldn't be really any difference other than the communication channels and other than maybe how you deal with contracts and other than scaling, right? The way you scale is different, but this is just how you run projects. And I remember him saying that to me, and I appreciated that because really that is the point. This is just how you run projects. So the difference between an $80 million project and a $1 billion project is the fractal nature of the teams, meaning let me just go ahead and take you into this here really quickly, into the principle. So the ideal team sizes, and in construction, I'm going to expand it a little bit, but it really is from 3 to 9, like the Scrum philosophy suggests. But I can see teams be successful where they're 3 to 12. Okay. But the team size is key. The ideal project size from a cost standpoint, in my opinion. And if people disagree with me, hey, I love it. I am giving you my opinions based off of observation and research. I may have some things that I'm going to tweak as I move forward in my life. All of us do, right? So the ideal project size is $60 to $100 million. I prefer 80 if you want to do an average, but really, if you have $1 billion project, that's probably 7 to 10 projects combined together. There isn't any real need to have a massive $1 billion project with only one centralized team. I would have a centralized team of executive leadership that guided that project in a good direction, that oversaw the independent I'm going to say independent, meaning they're autonomous, but they're tied and connected to the overall project. But they oversaw the other 7 to 10 projects and project teams. So we have to have that fractal nature, meaning that if you have that $1 billion project, you're looking at 7 to 10 independent, or 7 to 12, whatever needs to happen there, independent and separate, but also tied together and connected projects. So those are teams. Those are teams that are set to scale those independent projects that should have operational excellence and training and contracts and trade partner foreman and communication channels and success within those spheres. But then those leaders tie into and report to an overall scheduling system, tying and report to an overall financial system, an overall quality system, to the executive level leadership team that oversees the entire $1 billion project. Like I said, it's no different than having a Scrum of Scrums team or a Scrum of Scrums team. It's just no different. If I was on an executive level leadership team for a $1 billion project today, I would have a really cohesive group that had the right visual systems, the right metrics, the right KPIs, to where I could focus on the training. And let me say this clearly: the training, the observation, and the status of the KPIs for each individual project. And I would focus my time on the alignment of milestones and goals to make sure that each project tied into the rest. Obviously, on large projects like that, you're going to have strategies that deal with logistics. Obviously, on large projects like that, you're going to have strategies that deal with communication. You're going to have strategies that deal with contractor buyout. You can't have absolute chaos, right? You're going to want some efficiencies there. You're going to want to buy out some economies of scale, right? There are some larger strategies. On large projects like that, you're going to want to tie all of the survey networks in together. There's going to be some things that you want to network together, but that is coordinated at that executive level leadership team. And each project team needs to have the proximity and the cohesion to work there together. Now, if somebody said, could you move a $1 billion project? Could you move a $1 billion project into one set of trailers altogether? I wouldn't recommend it. I would make sure that you have the proximity with each individual project team. Have I seen projects that are $350 million in size be all in one big room? Yes. Not sure that that's the best way to do it. Would I recommend having the trailers in one big trailer yard, but have the teams in their own areas with proximity? Yes, I would absolutely recommend that. So my point is that it's really a matter of scaling. Let me tell you some principles here. We don't want to complicate the communication channels. If you told all of the team members on $1 billion project that they all had to communicate with each other, that increases the complexity so much that we lose productivity and we lose capacity. I would make sure that each $80 million project, each $100 million project, each $150 million project have their own office space with their own proximity, with their own communication channels, and keep it specific so you don't overwhelm the team. And then the superintendent and the project manager again report to that executive level leadership, and so do their KPIs, their standardized KPIs. Okay. You don't want to overcomplicate the communication channels. All right. Secondly, you don't want to control each individual team to the point that they don't have enough autonomy to be excellent. That's another point. And here's another, so meaning that if you are on a project and you're like, Jason, I'm not in control of this whole $1 billion project. Well, you don't need to be. You need to be in control of your piece of the pie. You need to be in control of your area on that project. And I absolutely would not start to separate teams by scope on large $1 billion projects. I would have them geographically controlled and make sure that they are in charge of specific buildings or specific sets of buildings. Okay. The other thing that you can't do that I hate seeing is when large mega projects ignore certain common areas because they haven't assigned it. Let me give you an example. I went to a $380 million hospital one time, and the stairwells looked like crap. The elevator and the loading dock looked like crap. And there were the entryways. The entryways, they just was not managed well. It did not look good. And it's because there was somebody in charge of the tower, the podium, the mechanical podium, the medical equipment floor. There were teams assigned to these areas, but no teams also oversaw the general logistics area. So we have to have that covered as well. Even if you just have a team that literally just covers logistics. I was at Intel one time, and they had a team that legitimately just took care of logistics, the site, the cleanliness of the entryways, the scheduling of deliveries, things like that. You have to make sure that there's a team running point on those key things and that there's no areas that are ignored. So now let's get into the question that I was given. So nobody knows who this is, but I want to say that I'm very impressed with asking this question, and I will answer it the best that I can. But my main message is that things are fractal. You can scale excellence in any direction. So he says, Jason, I'm not sure if you've covered these in upcoming episodes that I've not listened to, but I'm on episode 121 so far. Here we go. I know you have touched base on a few of these items, but not to the extent of these type of projects that I'm talking about so far. I'm talking about 1+ billion mega, 1 billion plus mega projects. On this magnitude, there are roughly 50 to 70 associates on a project this size, with 20 of them being superintendents, assistant supers, MEP coordinators, and the remainder being project managers, PEs, and other supporting staff. These projects use P6 scheduling and are required by the owners. So let me just go ahead and stop there for a minute. When you have 70 people, I want to be absolutely clear. Not only do they not naturally do this, but it is impossible to get 70 people talking to each other in an effective way as one group. That's like those military units of old. If you remember Napoleon fighting against the Austrians tried to have this one big, huge army unit that was, I'm just going to give the example, 70 persons working together versus Napoleon that would have smaller, more nimble units. So when we're on a mega project, again, the first thing that I would do is separate that project out into 60, 80, 100. The largest I would go would be 150, but I would target $120 million projects at the max. And I would say, okay, this project and project schedule needs to be developed. This project schedule needs to be developed. And then I would probably, for the whole campus, have a schedule, which actually probably I, as the main superintendent and on the executive team, oversaw of the infrastructure, water, sewer, chilled water, heating, hot water, all of these systems, right, that probably go back to a central plant, I would make sure to coordinate the tie-ins for those. So each project would have a Takt plan. Each project would have their own schedule. Each project would have milestones that tied into an overall enterprise schedule, to an overall enterprise summarized Takt plan, which is very easy to do. I'm actually going to do a YouTube video of that one day. So whereas each project shows a Takt plan by Takt zone, usually by 10,000 square feet, I might have my executive team Takt plan, my overall enterprise Takt plan would show each building and basically the duration, but along that duration, the key milestones of where they need to tie together. And then I would show the overall site, the campus, and the completion of the central plant, how it needed to tie together. And if the owner required the use of P6, fine. But on a project like that, that's going to take you, your schedulers up to a team size of 6 to 12. So that's 6 to 12 additional persons that you're going to need to employ to run P6. Do it if you want, whatever you want to do. But the key thing is I would make sure that all of those P6 schedules began with a Takt plan, always aligned with the Takt plan. And when I had the individual check-ins with superintendents from the different portions of the projects, I would review that Takt plan. Nobody on that executive leadership team will have time to dive into P6 to the level that it needs to be dove into, even if you're just looking at milestones. So that is absolutely what I would do. And as the executive team, or call it whatever you want. You can call it the team of teams, whatever you want to call it. I'm just saying the group that combines all of those projects together, I would very much make sure that that was coordinated with Takt plan, with P6, and then you have the other KPIs that are important to you as you move forward, and have that be something that you're able to report. And then each team is operating as projects with their own proximity and with their own certain levels of autonomy. It needs to be fractal. And so we're going back to the question. With that being said, here are some of the issues we've had, and I'd like to get your take on how you would handle these issues. These are in no particular order of importance, or other than I'm just stating my personal take on this particular project, but know they have similar issues on their like-sized projects, and looking forward to doing better on future projects I'm involved with. So number one, new people to the company and the company best practices and standards. With needing this amount of people, there will only be a few company people that have been with the company for any amount of time. The rest will be new and want to do things the way they want to do them, where they came from, or from the companies where they came from. So culture and teaming is an issue, and the alignment of superintendents is an issue. And so, okay, so I'm with you on this. I'm with you. I see what you're talking about. I really think that training, just like I've said on other podcasts, doubling, tripling, or quadrupling the amount of training is absolutely the key. And so that executive team, it's their job to align certain key systems. So probably on a mega project, when I say probably, I don't want to discount there might be other ways to do this, especially if you're on a joint venture. But you're probably going to want to standardize the accounting systems. You're probably going to want to standardize your systems that report your key performance indicators, right? You're probably going to want to standardize your scheduling systems, right? So I get all of that. It requires training. That executive level leadership team, those superintendents, and actually, so to your point, this is kind of funny, but if I was on that $1 billion project, I would have an area with proximity where we had our visuals for the team of teams, for all of the schedules combined. When we met, that would be the area where we meet. And I would very much have assistants that would help me coordinate that information and make sure that we were headed in a great direction. So just like in the Empire State Building, the lead superintendent had runners on a $1 billion project. I would have some help coordinating the information and making sure we were all on the same page, so that I had as little administrative items as humanly possible, so that I could focus on training. I literally would have a superintendent training, if not every week, every other week. I would constantly send out information. I would probably do a $1 billion project podcast for all of the superintendents. No, I wouldn't probably. I would do a $1 billion project podcast for all of the superintendents and project managers to constantly reinforce the way that we're supposed to do things. I would have helpers that would go from project to project that would help implement the operational excellence systems. So it's very much about training. If you want to get people from other companies and new people from a cultural standpoint to do the right things in the right direction and the right way, it all comes down to training. And so scaling that training system, making it consistent, and making sure that you take the time for it is probably one of the number one things that you should do. And somebody would be like, well, we don't have time. We're on a $1 billion project. But you don't have time because you don't focus on personal organization and team balance and health first. You have to have those items to then have the capacity to run a project, to then be able to do the training and constantly improve. So I would say, first and foremost, Takt planning. Number 2, the operational control system. Number 3, personal organization. Number 4, team balance and health. And if those were focuses to begin with, and you got those teams to where they had the right capacity and a certain amount of stability, you could do training every week with all of those folks. And again, on a $1 billion project, I would have the $1 billion project podcast where we every maybe 2 or 3 times a week sent out information that everyone was asked to listen to make sure that we were aligning and keeping up with our best practices. So let's go to point number 2, lean, not really happening. As things have gone on, we have incorporated some of the lean items like just-in-time deliveries, everything on rolling carts, but generally the team and the job site, between 500 and 1,400 people on board, have difficulty implementing the lean way, and it's been a challenge. And so again, this comes from training. And so our superintendents have to know how to do a couple of key things, right? So contractor grading, zero tolerance, lean implementation. They have to know the first and last planner system. And they have to be able to scale with interpersonal skills in their afternoon foreman huddles and in their morning worker huddles. It all comes from the ability of those leaders to be able to do those things and to be able to scale them in a proper fashion. If you want to have a job site, and if the overall job site is 500 to 1,400 people, which I believe would be the case, if you broke them out into individual projects, you're probably looking at 75 to 100 to maybe 300 people per project. That worker huddle is key to teaching lean. Those foreman huddles are key to teaching lean. The orientation for those projects are key to teaching lean. So we have to have those systems up. And COVID-19 is not an excuse. COVID-19 is not an excuse to not huddle your workers up every day and to get them together and to create that social group and to implement a lean culture. When you say, hey, we really haven't done lean, what you're saying is you haven't built and I'm not criticizing you haven't really built a lean culture. And the lean culture is built with proximity. And so I would very much say, again, it comes down to training. It comes down to having trained leaders. It comes down to making sure that if you're on a $1 billion project, that you have the authority and the influence. So, a gallon of influence, a teaspoon of authority on your project to go do those things, and that contractually you can go do those things. But if you do those things well, the afternoon foreman huddle, the morning worker huddle, zero tolerance, you have the right conditions out there on site, you can very much scale lean as long as you huddle your workers and you create that culture first. Now, the questions go on. There's 5 more. There's 5 more questions, so I'm going to go over one more, and then I'm going to pause on this podcast and save this one till Monday, and I'll finish the rest of the questions. The other one that he said was no composite cleanup and question mark with a site this big, and the dust and the mud and the walkways, the hallways, the roads, everything. Is that really even possible? I've heard people preach it before, but that's a tough sell for me. I definitely need some enlightenment here. So I would not use composite cleanup crews for the trades work. Let me be clear. When it comes to general logistics areas, loading docks, stairwells, hallways, elevators, these general areas, and especially the site, right, where you have general access ways. That's why we have the general conditions and general requirements with the right people in the right spots to get this done. And so I've never... so for composite cleanup crews, I don't want other contractors cleaning up one specific contractor's mess. I don't want the general contractor cleaning up trade partners' messes, but I also don't want trade partners cleaning up the general contractor's mess. The general contractor's mess are the general logistics areas, the parking areas, the access ways, the areas that would have to be sprayed down with water trucks, the loading docks, things like that. You should have people, a logistics foreman, and a team of laborers that handle those general areas absolutely 100%. So the other questions that we'll get into when I finish this podcast are, how do we do short-term scheduling? How do we improve team health? How do we improve the job site morale for trade partners? And how do we improve trade partners on such a large project to where it's not so much chaos? So I will answer that in the second podcast, but let me close this one out strong this way. Everything is fractal. If you're on $1 billion project and the executive team isn't spending the time on training, isn't spending the time on aligning, doesn't have the right KPIs, doesn't have the right visual systems, doesn't have a huddling area for the team of teams specifically, doesn't have runners and helpers, doesn't do a daily or 3 times a week podcast, doesn't do training, doesn't implement these, like I said, the integrated control system, doesn't show everyone how to be personally organized, doesn't create team balance and health, doesn't have these standard systems, but also provide the autonomy within the teams, then you need to do that at least on your independent, your individual, but connected project. There's nothing holding you back, to my knowledge, from making sure that you have operational excellence on that project specifically and setting an example for everyone else. At least control what you can and don't let the chaos of the overall project hinder you. We give up because of the grand scale of these types of projects, but really it's just a matter of scaling a fractal system. And so make sure that you, on your project, wherever you are on that large size project, make your project heaven on earth, make it remarkable, and control the narrative on your project and set the example. That's the key. We're going to cover more of this when we come back. On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.